AI agents can generate ideas faster than people can validate them. This episode gives you a screenshot-ready AI hypothesis validation funnel for deciding what AI can explore and what evidence, replication, and human judgment must close. In July 2026, Google DeepMind published Conjecture Machines, drawing on interviews with 10 researchers and engineers to examine a new bottleneck. Agents can accelerate ideas and candidate solutions while validation remains constrained by experiments, data, and institutions. This is a forward-looking analysis, not a controlled experiment. It does not prove that every AI workflow becomes faster or better. This episode extracts a reusable human-AI method. This video is packed with practical, high-value insights to help you get better at using AI. It's a longer one, so follow Tiny Agent and save it so you don't lose it. First, separate generating an idea from confirming a discovery so you can see why more output may create more work for people. Agents can rapidly combine literature, data, and known patterns into many hypotheses, explanations, and candidate solutions. A fluent new idea is still an unvalidated conjecture. It has not established causality or ruled out a simpler explanation. When generation becomes cheap, teams can mistake candidate volume for progress and novel wording for new knowledge. A credible finding must at least identify its evidence, the observation that could disprove it, and whether an independent person can reproduce it. Do not end with, "Give me 20 more ideas." Require every candidate to include evidence, counterevidence, and a next test. AI can own volume. A confident sentence cannot own validity. Chapter recap. First, an idea is a candidate, not a discovery. Second, cheaper generation needs a limited validation queue. Third, humans define what evidence counts. Next, bind every hypothesis to evidence so sounds plausible becomes an inspectable work item. Ask AI to define scope first, who or what the claim applies to, under which conditions, and which observable outcome it predicts. Then require direct support, indirect support, and counter-evidence, with data, citations, or experiment records that lead back to the original page. An unsupported summary remains unconfirmed. Old evidence, mismatched samples, or correlation without causation must sit beside the conclusion as limitations. Ask AI to propose a falsification test. If the hypothesis is wrong, which observation will expose it fastest? Humans inspect the most consequential primary evidence, checking that citations, data definitions, and task conditions actually align. For high-risk conclusions, preserve primary material instead of passing only a summary to another agent. Chapter recap. First, define scope and observable outcome. Second, place support, counter-evidence, and primary sources together. Third, humans accept critical evidence at the source. Then prioritize validation so limited time is not spread evenly across every polished idea. Start with value. If the claim holds, which real decision changes? Next, assess risk. If it is wrong, could it affect payment, publication, health, safety, permissions, or an irreversible action? Third, assess testability. Is there a clear metric, control, and repeatable procedure, or only subjective interpretation? Fourth, estimate validation cost, minutes of data checking, days of user testing, or a costly real-world experiment. Move high-value, high-risk, quickly falsifiable hypotheses forward. Discard low-value candidates that are expensive to validate before agent volume consumes human attention. AI can estimate cost, find conflicting evidence, and draft tests. People must decide which outcomes justify real consequences. Chapter recap. First, do not validate every generated result. Second, rank value, risk, testability, and cost. Third, real consequences set human priority. Now add replication and human takeover so you know when an automated flow must stop. First, rerun the same agent without revealing the answer. A result that depends on one phrasing or one search is not stable. Then reproduce it with independent data, a different prompt, or a different executor so the same context does not duplicate the same error. When results conflict, do not ask a third agent to vote with a longer explanation. Return to the primary evidence and isolate differences in variables, data definitions, or tool state. The source notes that experimental facilities, real-world feedback, and peer review do not scale like idea generation. Automated laboratories remain expensive and early. When evidence is missing, replication fails, permission is insufficient, or an action is irreversible, the status remains unconfirmed and an accountable person decides whether to continue, narrow, or stop. Record who validated what, which material they used, and what remains uncertain so the reusable asset is an evidence chain, not yesterday's confidence. Chapter recap. First, rerunning one flow is not independent replication. Second, return to evidence instead of asking agents to vote. Third, humans take over high-risk or irreversible actions. Finally, complete the AI hypothesis validation funnel so you have a reusable acceptance card for agent work. Box 1 records the hypothesis, subject, conditions, observable outcome, and the real decision it changes. Box 2 records evidence, direct support, indirect support, counter-evidence, primary source, and publication date. Box 3 records falsification, the smallest test that could disprove the claim fastest and the stopping condition. Box 4 records priority, value, risk, testability, and cost determine what to test first and what to discard. Box 5 records replication, who reruns it with independent data or steps, whether the result matches, and where it differs. Box 6 records peer judgment and takeover, who reviews uncertainty, approves risky action, and owns recovery after failure. Screenshot and save this funnel. Use it to validate your next AI hypothesis. Chapter recap. First, hypotheses carry evidence and falsification conditions. Second, priority and replication control validation cost. Third, people retain final responsibility and takeover. To sum up, AI agents can generate ideas faster than people can validate them. Treat generation as the candidate entrance, not the conclusion. Give every hypothesis evidence, counterevidence, priority, and a replication record. AI expands search and drafts tests. People inspect primary evidence, own real consequences, and take over under uncertainty or risk. Where does your workflow bottleneck most often? Evidence, replication, or final human judgment? Tell me in the comments. Follow Tiny Agent. Tiny Agent helps you get better at using AI.